Have you ever found yourself snapping at your husband or your children, and almost immediately afterwards you feel guilty and think, why did I just say that? I know you love your family and you don't want to be the wife who gets irritated over little things or the mom who loses her patience quickly. You might be telling yourself, next time I won't react like this, or next time I will be gentler. But then your child starts whining about wanting the sweet in the cupboard. Your husband says something that rubs you the wrong way. And before you even can stop yourself, you are back to feeling frustrated all over again. And it just feels like this cycle you cannot break. Well, something happened to me in church yesterday that really helped me see my frustration in a completely new way. And I think it might change the way you see yours too. Welcome to our Peaceful Heart podcast. I am Julie, a wife and mom who have had my fair share of emotional, overwhelmed moments in my home, feeling anxious, tired, and sometimes just irritable. But once I started seeking God constantly in the overwhelm, I began to experience unshakable peace. And that's what this podcast is about. Learning to surrender our thoughts, our emotions, our overwhelm in everyday moments to God so we can walk in the peace He promises to those who seek Him. So grab something warm to sip on, settle in your favorite spot, and let's lean into Jesus and learn to walk in His peace right in your home, starting from this episode. I want to read a review that someone recently left about the podcast because it really encouraged me, and I think so many of you will be able to relate to what she shared. She wrote, I just started listening to the podcast after a long week of exhaustion and frustrations organizing our home while homeschooling my kids. I felt that I had a hard time waking up and getting off my bed because I had this long to-do list in my mind. I was overwhelmed and losing peace, and thank God I found this podcast. And everything she mentioned and shared is exactly what I thought and struggled with. I was able to change my mindset and let go of my perfectionism and just to embrace myself, my husband, and my children. Thank you for your honest sharing. I just want to say thank you so much for the women who wrote this review. I honestly don't know how to pronounce your name, but I really appreciate you for taking the time to write this. And I'm glad that the podcast encouraged you. If you have been listening to her Peaceful Heart podcast and it has encouraged you in some way, I would genuinely love if you would take a moment to leave a review as well. It truly helps that this podcast gets spread to more women who need to hear this message. I would appreciate it, and thank you so much. All right, so I went to church yesterday morning with one desire. I wanted to praise and worship. That was genuinely what I wanted to do. I went with this mindset of when I get to church, I'm going to worship. Now, I should probably mention that we were already late to church, and honestly, that was my fault, okay? I did feel a bit frustrated with myself for not being on time, but anyway. So, we got to church, and when we walked in, the church was quite full. Well, actually, the church was packed with people. Now, we have flags in church that people can use through worship. So we were walking in, my son tried to slip past someone, and at that exact moment, they swung the flag and the pole of the flag hit him right on the head. So I picked him up. I went outside because he was crying. I soothed him, spoke to him, and when he was better, we could go inside again. So when we got inside, he wanted to go into the playroom to get a toy. I tried to reason with him to just go alone and get the toy so that I can worship, but he did not want to, so okay, I gave in. I went with him, but I started to feel a bit frustrated because I truly wanted to worship that morning. So we went into the room, and suddenly he couldn't decide what toy he wanted. He wanted this one, and then he wanted that one, and then he wanted someone else's toy, and he was just completely indecisive. And I started getting more frustrated because I truly just want to worship. this morning. And now I was standing in a room trying to help my son decide which toy he wanted. And I think it's in these moments where we just feel, I don't care anymore. Like, just take any toy or just take the whole toy box if you have to. Those moments where you kind of just lose it. And then, of course, seeing all the toys, he started asking me to stay in the room with him and to play with him. And I remember feeling this frustration rising up inside of me because in my mind, I had already decided what I wanted to be doing. I wanted to be in church. I wanted to worship. And now my child needs something from me. And I think this is where so many of us can relate, because it is often not one huge thing that suddenly makes us frustrated. Sometimes it is a series of little things. The child is crying, they need something, they can't decide, they want you to stay, then your husband says something, then the house is messy, then there is another responsibility waiting for you, and suddenly you feel like you are just going to lose it. And I did lose it. But here is what it looked like. I got down on my knees in front of my son. I took both of his hands in mine and I looked him in the eyes and I told him, I am feeling really, really frustrated right now. And then I drew him close to me and I began to pray. But he could hear me praying. And I really just prayed something in the line of, Lord, I really want to worship you today, but it might not happen. Please help me to be okay with that, and please help me to be selfless. Because as I started praying, I realized I was getting frustrated because of my selfishness. My son is standing in the way of what I want to do, and that makes me feel frustrated with him. The root of my frustration is actually I can't get what I want. It was as if the Lord just quietly and gently told me that while I was praying. So after the prayer, I was completely calm. I helped him to choose a toy. We took it outside the room with us into the church. He sat on the ground at my feet and played while I was worshiping. And then something happened that I honestly cannot explain apart from the Lord. I felt this overwhelming love for my son. Now, I don't think I can love him more than I already do, but in that moment, I felt as if the Lord had poured something fresh into my heart that just overflowed to how I am feeling towards my son and to how I'm reacting towards him as well. And that was just complete love. Now, my son kept interrupting me throughout worshiping. He would grab me, he would make funny noises, he would just distract me. However, this time I did not get frustrated with him at all. Every time I just talked to him calmly, I went on his level, talked to him, or explained to him why it's disrespectful to make funny noises in church when everyone is worshiping. So I think I can say my circumstances did not change. Like after the prayer, my son didn't become this wonderful child. He was still interrupting me. He was still him. But something inside of me changed. And the only way I can explain it is that I had gone to Jesus' feet with my frustration and he had met me there. And I think this is something that we so easily forget as Christian wives and mothers. We often try to change our reactions by striving to be better, by striving to react better, without actually first going to the Lord and to surrender that so that he can change our hearts. Maybe you have told yourself so many times, I need to be more patient. I need to stop getting irritated. I need to stop snapping at my child. I need to respond better to my husband. And you genuinely want to change. But then the next difficult moment comes and you find yourself right back in the same cycle again. You are not the only wife who feels overwhelmed by her own reactions. You are not the only mother who loves her family but still finds herself becoming irritated, impatient, and frustrated with the people she loves the most. And I don't believe the answer is that you simply need to try harder to be a better wife or mother. I've tried. And I can tell you, honestly, it didn't work. But what if you could understand where your emotional overwhelm is actually coming from when you keep getting stuck in the same patterns, and what you can begin doing differently so that you can start experiencing more of God's peace in your everyday life. I created a free mini transformation workshop that will help you understand what is actually happening beneath the surface and give you practical steps that you can begin applying immediately. I walk you through why overwhelm keeps repeating itself, how to begin taking your thoughts captive, how to make time with God even when life is busy, and how to prepare yourself for the situations that so often cause us to lose our patience, that so often cause us to feel frustrated and irritable. So, if you want to move from emotional overwhelm to a peaceful spirit-led life, I would love for you to join me. The mini transformation workshop is completely free, and you'll find the link in the show notes of this episode, or you can go to www.elevatedwife.com. So I believe the Christian life was never meant to be lived by simply trying harder to be better at something. Jesus said in John 15 that we are to abide in him because apart from him, we can do nothing. And I think this is why sitting at Jesus' feet is so important, because before I expect myself to pour out something, I need to be connected to the source that it flows from, which of course is Jesus. So, for an example, if you're frustrated with your child or your husband, you need to look at Jesus and ask him to fill you, that it can be an outpouring of him to your husband and your child. And that is truly what I feel I experienced in church yesterday morning. That's why I believe our time with God cannot simply become another thing we feel guilty about or because we're not doing it. It is not just something that we need to add to our schedule because we are Christian women and we are supposed to read our Bibles and pray. We come to God because we actually need him. We come to him because we are frustrated and we can feel that we are about to say something we shouldn't say or react in a way that we know is not coming from love. We come to him because we get to the end of ourselves and we realize, Lord, I cannot do this in my own strength. And I think that is something that we need to become more comfortable with, because sometimes we almost feel like we have to clean ourselves up before we come to God. We feel like we have to first calm down and be less emotional before we can pray. But you don't have to do that. You can come to Jesus and say, Lord, I am frustrated right now. And you can do that in church, like me. You can say, Lord, I am angry. I don't like the way I am feeling. I don't want to serve right now. I don't want to be patient right now. I want to do what I want to do. You can actually be honest with him about what is happening inside of you. Because did you know that when you're honest with God, you are actually worshiping him in truth? That is profound, isn't it? I believe when we are honest with him, he begins to show us what is actually happening in our hearts, just like he did with me in church. He showed me I was actually being selfish. And honestly, I would have never thought that I was being selfish. So when we are frustrated, I believe our focus often moves away from God onto what your child is doing, or maybe what your husband said. It consumes your mind. And then you start telling yourself lies. If my child would just stop whining, then I would be okay. If my husband would just stop doing that, then I would feel peaceful. If my family would just listen to me, then I would not be so frustrated. And maybe there are some truth in the fact that certain things are difficult or that certain behavior is genuinely frustrating. I'm not saying that we should pretend that difficult things are not difficult, but sometimes without even realizing it, we begin to believe that our peace is dependent on everyone around us behaving the way we want them to behave. And that is a very difficult place to live, because our children are not always going to behave the way we want them to. Our husbands are not always going to say the things we wish they would say. Our plans are going to be interrupted. There are going to be days when everything seems to be going wrong. And if our peace depends on our circumstances being perfect, then we are always going to be vulnerable to losing our peace. And that is why I keep coming back to the importance of sitting at Jesus' feet and drawing from his strength, because I don't think the answer is simply that we need to try harder to be more patient. I truly believe it's about living in more surrender to the Lord and to worship him in truth, to say, Lord, this is how I'm feeling, but I'm surrendering it to you, and please change my heart so I can respond better. And then there's also another deeper layer to this that I want to speak about, which is how do we practically begin to respond differently when our child is whining, when our husband says something that irritates us, when the house is chaotic and we can feel ourselves reaching that point where we are about to react or just lose it. So we are going to talk about it in the next episode, which is in Friday's episode. I want to give you something practical that you can actually begin using when you feel frustration rising inside of you, something you can do in that moment to help you pause, bring your focus back to the Lord, and begin responding instead of simply reacting. I want to walk you through something practical that you can begin applying the next time you feel yourself getting frustrated. And before you go, I also want to invite you to join my free workshop, Become a more peaceful wife and mom without constantly striving to be better. If you feel like you are constantly trying to be more patient, more peaceful, and more in control of your emotions, but you keep finding yourself falling back into the same patterns of overwhelm, irritability, and frustration, this workshop, I believe, is for you. I will show you how renewing your mind through God's truth can help you begin breaking free from the patterns that keep you overwhelmed and reacting in your own home. And I will walk you through 3 biblical steps to begin becoming a more peaceful wife and mother. You can sign up for the workshop through the link in the show notes of this episode, or you can go to www.elevatedwife.com. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I truly hope this episode encouraged your heart and pointed you back to Jesus. If this conversation blessed you, I would love for you to share it with another wife or mom who needs this encouragement today. And if you haven't already, I'd love for you to follow the podcast so you don't miss future episodes. And then one last favor, if you don't mind, I want to ask you to leave a review because it truly helps this podcast reach more wives who are feeling overwhelmed and need this kind of encouragement. And it's also the only way for me to get to know you. So please leave that review. And remember, you don't have to carry it all. You just need to learn how to surrender it all. I'll see you in the next episode.